Another day, another frame. Today we're taking a look at the URUAV Lemur 220, which looks a lot like this. This came from Banggood. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is most of the time, all the plates are made of carbon fiber. However, on this one, the middle plate is actually made of aluminum. Now, you think, when I first saw that, I thought, man, it's kind of unique. And, you know, I don't see many frames that have that. There is the Floss 3 frame coming out that is going to have the middle piece being aluminum. Now, I think the point of that is to hopefully try to add a little bit more strength to the frame, and then you can make the rest of it a little bit skimpier on the plate's thicknesses. Now, I'm not sure exactly what these are, but we're going to look at this and see what we think of it. So here are all the parts laid out. It comes with the battery strap, the 3D printed antenna holder for the back of the quad, a couple of camera mounts for the front of your quad. Again, they're just 3D printed. And I think blue is the only option you get. It has the top plate here, which is kind of a scrawny X. The bottom plate with holes big enough here that you can feed screws through the bottom plate and tighten and loosen your flight board without having to disassemble the bottom plate. Also, it comes with this battery plate holder. I got several of these that I am not using. It also came with these padded feet. Now, I use 2 of these to go underneath the frame, between the frame and the battery, and that way I can pull it up tight. And these will put a little pressure on the battery to help hold it in there tight against the battery strap. Now, of all this, the main star of the show is really this main plate here, this aluminum piece. Now, if you look closely, you can kind of tell these 2 holes here are threaded. All the other holes are not, well, not all the other flight board holes are not threaded. Just these 2 on each arm. So when you put the screw through the arm, they're just going to thread into this. So since this is going to be replacing a lot of the middle pieces, like here's the original carbon fiber middle plate. On here, it weighs about 5.6 grams. The top plate here, it weighs in about 4.1 grams. Now this aluminum piece, it's going to be a little bit heavier, but it has the rigidity of, you know, aluminum. So it's coming in at 16. 16 sounds pretty heavy, especially for a middle plate. The advantage, though, is that you are not going to break this very easily. It's going to take a major crash to break an aluminum plate like this. Now, they would have done themselves a little bit of a favor, maybe to try to hollow this out a little bit. Instead of just making the bottom piece flat, they could have, you know, grooved some out, but you would have lost a little bit of the strength in that, but you probably could have gotten away with it as long as you had several vertical pieces going back and forth to the front and the rear of the quad. But anyway, let's get this thing put together so we can see what it really looks like. So here's the first arm installed on this bottom plate here. Now, one thing that's kind of neat is if you look, you can see how that arm is kind of cut. And this one is cut, you know, well, since they're the same arms, but it's flipped over, they line up right there perfectly. Now that's going to give a lot of strength to share between these arms. However, on this is probably going to be in the weak point right here where this bend is. But I think with these screws in here and with this in here, it's going to help give a lot more strength than it would have without that stuff. So here's the Lemur 220 frame fully assembled. This thing feels super solid. And I don't know if it just feels solid because of this heavier middle plate, but it feels real solid. If I try to bend these arms, you can see there's a little bit, maybe you can see, there's a little bit of flex in the arm, but the middle plate is not moving anywhere. Now these arms are cut correctly. They have the weaves going down the arm, so the opposite layers are probably going across the arm, so those are cut well. Now, and here you have plenty of room to run your battery strap between these 2 middle plates. This is the antenna holder. Now you can flip this upside down and run the antenna down between your arms, and that's always worked well for me. I'm sure it cuts down on the range quite a bit because the carbon fiber is not going to let the radio frequencies pass through, but for racing I've never had a problem. You can also put it back up here, kind of how they had it in the picture, where the antenna comes up, and you know, and it does fine that way too. It would be a little bit more vertical flying with the antenna pointing up rather than down, but you know, to each his own. If it works, it works. Also up here, these 3D printed pieces are pretty nice. They're printed out of TPU, and they're not cheap ones. Well, they might be cheap TPU, but they're not breakable. They have a lot of flex to them, which is good because that should help eliminate some of the vibrations actually getting into the camera itself. But overall, though, I like this pretty well. Down here on the bottom, it has the holes that are large enough to slide the screw heads through to mount your flight controller and your 4-in-1 ESC up there. It also has the mounting holes for your 20 by 20 flight boards, so you know, you got a lot of options with this one. All right, I'm gonna get this thing weighed and then we'll get some measurements off of it. So here's just the frame by itself. It comes in about 86 grams. Now it's kind of heavy, and like I said, I think a lot of that weight is coming from that middle aluminum plate. If we throw on this power distribution board, it goes up to about 92. If you throw on the battery strap, it goes up to about 96. So it's not an ultralight frame necessarily, just because it gets up over that 80 mark by the frame by itself. And most ultralights are going to kind of go up to maybe 70, maybe 80 grams at the very highest. So this is a little bit heavier than an ultralight. I think the Floss 3 comes in about 69.5, so about 70 grams. So this is pushing about 16 grams heavier than a Floss 3 frame would. Here's the included battery strap, and this thing comes in about 195. 195 should be long enough for most 4S batteries, but it's not going to be long enough for 6S batteries. For 6S, you're going to need about 220. So I don't know why they keep doing this, but I don't know. From the polls I've done, it seems like a lot of people are still flying 4S, so 4S battery strap makes sense, I guess. From the center of the motor hole to the other center of the other motor hole, it comes in about 218 or so. So calling it a 220 is probably pretty good. At least they overestimate instead of underestimating. From front to back, it comes in about 166 millimeters. From side to side, it comes in about 141 millimeters. The arms are 5 millimeters thick. The arms are about 10 millimeters wide. The bottom plate's almost 2 millimeters. The top plate's almost 2 millimeters. The aluminum piece inside is actually 3 millimeters thick. That explains a little bit more about why it's so heavy. For the camera spacing, you have about 18.5 millimeters of space. And the spacers and the spacing inside is about 30 millimeters. So this Lemur 220 spins 5-inch props just fine. They clear the body fine, and they got plenty of room between it and the prop across from it. Now you might be able to run some like 5.1 or 5.2 props, but 5.1s would probably fit for sure. 5.2s might be getting kind of close. This is the Lemur 220. It's not a bad frame. There does have some things I'm not really a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of the arms taking a turn inside there. I kind of like them to be straight, or at least have a little bit more of a curve rather than, you know, make such a distinguishing, you know, weak area of the arm there. Also, this doesn't have extra parts available yet that I've seen, like extra arms or anything available. But I do really like this aluminum plate in the middle. I think this is going to be cool. I think a lot of people are going to really like this on both this frame and on the Floss 3 frame. And other frames I think are going to start coming out with this aluminum plate as well. Although they're going to have to come up with ways to make it lighter, because that part of the frame, that aluminum piece, really brings down or brings up the weight of the overall frame. I'm not really a big fan of this little skinny part up here, but I do like that they actually have the 4 spacers instead of trying to limit it down to 3. So I am a fan of that. Also, I'm really glad they included decent 3D printed camera holders and antenna holders. And see, I'm squishing this to show you that it's not just cheapo stuff like another one that I reviewed a while back. But I do like that. I do like having the 2 plates apart with the arms not crossing the front to back plane. That way you can get your battery strap through there. I do like that it included the spacers to come on, the little padded things to go in here. This is where I was saying I like to put those on there and then put the battery on it, and they kind of squish and put a little pressure on the battery to help hold it in a little better, especially since this frame can only hold 1 battery strap, not like the Boss frame or some of the longer frames where you actually have 2 of them in front of each other. Now this, if you look closely, you can see this is a little bit shifted to the back of the frame. Well, actually, this is actually centered in the frame. The front posts are actually pushed forward a little bit, which gives a little bit more space in the front. I like that because you're going to have that camera sitting here at an angle, and you don't want it interfering with the flight board up there. I do like to see this thing kind of pulled back a little bit, but to do that, you kind of have to get more of a stretched body in the middle rather than, you know, just kind of like this where all the arms are coming in and making a good X in the middle. So anyway, this is a stretched X. I didn't mean to infer that it's not a stretched X. Anyway, this is the Lemur 220 frame. I think this is pretty cool. It's from Banggood. I got some links down in the description. If you have any questions about this, leave them down in the comments, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. And as always, thanks for watching.